කැරකෙන ලෝකයේ දකුණු අන්තයෙන් ඔබ වෙත තිලින කෙරෙන මාර්ගගත සංදේශය සභාගාරය
හොඳයි ඔක්තෝබර් මාසේ අලුත් මාසේ තවත් සභාගාරයේ වැඩසටහනකුත් එක්ක සභාගාරයේ ඉඳන් අපි වැඩ කටයුතු ආරම්භ කරන්නයි සූදානම් වෙන්නේ. සභාවෙන් අවසරයි මම තිලක් ගමගේ.
මම දේවලෝචන රණසිංහ. අද සභාගාරය මං හිතන්නේ තිලක් ටිකක් වැඩි වැදගත්කමකින් යුක්ත වෙනවා. එකක් අපි මේ ගේන්න යන වැඩසටහන වෙනදා කතා කරන මාතෘකාවලට වඩා ටිකක් වෙනස්. ඒ ගැන පැහැදිලි කරන්න ඔබට ඉතුරු කරලා අපේ සභාගාරයේ Facebook පිටුව සම්බන්ධ ටිකක් වැදගත් සම්දිස්ථානයක් ගැන අපේ සභාගාරයේ හිතවතුන් දැනුවත් කරොත් හොඳයි කියලා මට හිතුණා. ඇත්තටම අපේ Facebook පිටුවට දැන් සබ්ස්ක්‍රයිබර්ස්ලා 1000ක් දෙනා සභාගාරයේ Facebook පිටුවට එකතු වෙලා තියෙනවා. පසුගිය කාලේ අපි ගත්තොත් තිලක් අපි අපේ සභාගාරයේ හිතවතුන්ව දැනුවත් කළා. 1,37,000කට වඩා වැඩි පිරිසක් අපේ සභාගාරයේ Facebook පිටුවට පිවිසිලා අපේ රීල්ස් ඒ වගේම අපේ සාකච්ඡා නරඹලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් එවන් වූ Facebook පිටුවට දැන් සබ්ස්ක්‍රයිබර්ස්ලා 1000ක් ඉන්නවා. ඉතින් ඒක මං හිතන්නේ තාම කෙටි කාලයක් තුළ අපි ලබාගත්ත ලොකු ජයග්‍රහණයක්.
අනිවාර්යෙන්ම දේවා ඒක ඇත්තටම හරිම සතුටට කාරණයක්. ස්තුතියි අපි වහන අපිත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධ වෙන Facebook කරහා YouTube හරහා සහ රේඩියෝ හරහා 2000 රේඩියෝ නාලිකාව හරහා අපිත් එක්ක එකතු වෙන ඔබ සියලු දෙනාටම අපි අපේ ආදරය බොහොම හදපිරි ආදරය ඔබ වෙත පිරිනවන්නත් මේ අවස්ථාව කරගන්නවා. ඒ වගේම දේවා ඔබ කිව්වාද සුවිශේෂී පුද්ගලයෙක් අපි මේ සභාගාරයට ගෙන්න ගන්න සූදානම් වෙනවයි කියලා. ඒකත් එක්කම අද පොඩි මේ සුවිශේෂීකම් කීපයම නිසාම අපේ සභාගාරයට ප්‍රවේශ වෙනකොට අපි අර ඉන්ට්‍රෝ එක කියලා කියන්නේ අපේ පුරුදු වැඩසටහනේ ආරම්භක සමහර අර ඉන්ට්‍රෝ එක චුට්ටක් වෙනස් වෙලා තිබුණා. මං හිතනවා අපේ අසන්නන් ඒටත් පොඩක් කැමැති ඇති කියලා අපි පොඩක් අලුත් වෙලා නේද? අලුත් විදියට ටික සභාගාරයේ වැඩ කටයුතු කරමින් ඉදිරියට යන්න තමයි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් අපි කතා කරමු අද සභාගාරයට එන අපේ අමුත්ත ගැන. දැන් ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවේ ඉන්න අපි ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවේ ඉන්නකොට ඉතින් අපි සංක්‍රමණිකයෝනේ ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවට නේද? ඉතින් අපිට බොහොම කලින් ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවට ආපු අය ලාංකිකයන් කියමුකෝ අපි. එතකොට ඒගොල්ලන් මේ වන විට ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවේ මේ සංස්කෘතියත් එක්ක මිශ්‍ර වෙලා ඕස්ට්‍රේලියානු දිවි පෙවෙත සාමාන්‍ය ජනජීවිතය මේ සියල්ලම හොඳටම හුරු වෙලා ඒගොල්ලන් ඇත්තටම ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ මුල් අර පවුල් පසුබිම් නැත්නම් මුල් පෙනුම් ඒ පවුල් වල විකාශනය කිසියම් විදියක වෙනස් වීමකට ලක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒක සමහරලාට අපිටත් දැනෙනවා අපේ පවුල් වලට ඉස්සරහට මොනවා වෙයිද කියලා එක විදියකට. එහෙම නේද?
ඔව් ඉතින් අපි ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවේ හිටියට අපිට හැමතිස්සෙම දැනෙනවානේ අපි ඉන්න නොරටක කියලා. ඉතින් ලංකාවේ දේවල් අපිට කොච්චර කවුරු කොහොම කිව්වත් හරියට මිස් වෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ ගැනත් මං හිතන්නේ අපේ අවධානය යොමු වේ මේ සාකච්ඡාවේදී. ඒ වගේම තිලක් මං හිතන්නේ වෙනදා අපි කතා කරන දේවල් වලට වඩා ටිකක් වෙනස් මාතෘකාවක් ඔස්සේ අපි ඇදෙන්න ඉදිරියට. මේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවෙන් සංක්‍රමණය වූ මේ පවුල අදෙහි ඉන්නේ දෙවනි පුරුකේ නැත්නම් දෙවනි පරම්පරාවේ වැඩිමලා ඔවුන් සම්බන්ධයි ඔබත් මමත් සීලු දෙනා ප්‍රිය කරන ආදරය කරන ජනප්‍රියම ක්‍රිකට් ක්‍රීඩාවට. ඒ ක්‍රිකට් ක්‍රීඩාවේ ඉන්න පතාක යෝධයෙක් එක්ක ක්‍රීඩා කරලා තියෙනවා මේ පවුල ඔස්ට්‍රේලියාවට අරන් ආපු ඒ පළමු පරම්පරාවේ නියමුවා. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා බොහෝම රසවත් කතාබහක් වේතිලක් මං හිතන්නේ ඒ කතාවට අදාළේ කරුණු වැඩි කාලයක් නොගෙනම ඉක්මනින් අපේ හිතවතුන්ට තිරණ කරන්නට අපි මේ අවස්ථාවක් කොට ගන්න ඕනේ. වගේම අපේ හිතවතුන්ට විශේෂයෙන් කියන්න වෙනවා අද අපි සභාගාරයේ කතිකාව සිදු කරන්නේ ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවෙන්. එහෙම නේද?
ඔව් ඒක තමයි ඔක තමයි අනිත් ප්‍රශ්නය අර සංක්‍රමණික පවුල්වල ඉදිරි පරම්පරා කීපයක් ගත කරනකොට සමහර වෙලාවට සමහරුන්ගේ බොහෝ වෙලාවට ඉතින් අර සිංහල භාෂාව එක්ක තියෙන ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ තියෙන සම්බන්ධකම ටිකක් අඩු වෙනවා. දැන් මේ උදාහරණයේදී අපේ අද ආරාධිත අමුත්තා සම්බන්ධයෙන් ගත්තොත් ඔහුට සිංහල කතා කරන්න බෑ. ඉතින් අපිට අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ඔහුත් එක්ක සුද්දගේ භාෂාවෙන් ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවෙන් කතා කරන්න වෙනවා.
එහෙනම් අපි පටන් ගමු අද සාකච්ඡාව. All right, everybody. It's a really remarkable day today for our program. Sabagare, we call it the forum. So we have today with us Mr. Micheal Kellart. Now, Micheal Kellart is coming from a Sri Lankan background, and Michael's grandfather actually played cricket in his long cricket career. And what is special about his career is he played side by side with none other than Sir Donald Bradman. So when Sir Donald Bradman toured Sri Lanka, Michael's grandfather has played cricket with Sir Donald Bradman. So it has a very big significance in terms of cricket in Sri Lanka, as well as in any stage where Sir Donald Bradman is playing, it always had a great significance. So, Micheal, we would love to welcome you today to our program and look forward to having a fantastic conversation.
Ayubowan.
Ayubowan, Micheal.
Ayubowan.
So very great to hear when you say Ayubowan from sort of like Aussie accent. That's really nice. And to start our conversation, Micheal, I thought like to ask few short questions from you to begin with. Hope you can give us short answers too. Okay, so the first question to you is, what part of Australia do you live in now?
I live in Melbourne and the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, and many would know it's Chaminda lives out this way as well, which is out in the place called Narre Warren, which is just north of Dandenong.
Right. So, do you follow cricket yourself?
Yeah, actually played cricket. Yes, myself.
All right.
As you know, Tilak, president of our club and former coach as well. So,
yep.
For Fountain Gate Cricket Club.
Of course. Okay, this is the third question, and if you had to choose, all right, Aussie meat pie or Sri Lankan curry?
You wanted short answers, and that's a really tough one because growing up, I used to eat the hottest curries with the most chili, and I couldn't actually eat them because I was a bit ossified with my taste bud. I was born in Australia, first generation Australian, so I'd take the meat pie every time. But now that mum and dad are gone, and we're basically all Aussies now, the Kellarts, there's not many with even an accent left. I would love a curry. In 5 minutes, I would have a curry. That would be, that would just, those days, I don't want them to go. But unfortunately, none of the Aussie connections and people that we've, since become with their Aussie culture have taken up the art of making good curries, unfortunately.
Right.
So in your own means, like, do you feel that you have any connections to Sri Lanka, culturally or in any way at all?
Oh, yeah. Look, every time, we connect through sport and, India, Sri Lanka, Australia, very keen sporting nations. And, obviously when there's a connection and they're talking about these big names, Bradman, W.G. Grace, who my great-granduncle clean bowled at Gaul, and he's got his hat now in the Lord's Museum. I mean, there's a connection there. Obviously, if you look at the history of our family, it's, my grandfather was a double international. He played hockey as well for Ceylon back in the day. So those things are rare feats. And, we're very proud of our Sri Lankan heritage. And when it comes to Australia versus Sri Lanka, in cricket or any sport, I can't lose, can I?
Have you ever been to Sri Lanka?
Yeah, when I was 17, I went back. My Dad promised he'd take us all back. So, that was in 1978. It's changed a bit since then. There wasn't even a Macca's or a Red Rooster back then. Now there's Macca's and KFC and everything there.
Yeah, true. All right. So, okay. So as you I mentioned before, of course, your grandfather has a special place in cricket history, especially when it comes to Sri Lanka and Australian cricket at least. So can you tell us who he was and a bit of background stories that you know about him, things like that?
Well, it starts back from his uncle, who also represented Ceylon, and at the turn of the century, clean bowled W.G. Grace at Gaul. They then took his hat and they put it in the pavilion at Lord's, and it was one of those Ellison hats, which is a hard hat, like a cap that's hard, and it's in a glass case at Lord's as the only Ceylonese player to get W.G. Grace out. So
would you be able to mention his name?
Tommy Kellart. So if you put in Tommy, T-O-M-M-I, Tommy Kellart, it'll come up. All those connections will come up. And W.G. Grace, his name would come up.
Right. So in terms of your grandfather,
Pops is the so then he's obviously that was his uncle, and so Pops and his four brothers all played for Ceylon together. It was interesting that they called him the cricketing Kellarts, all different levels. Pops was made the captain, of course. This is back in 1930, 31, 30 to 30, 1930 to 33. And he was like 1901, born in 1901, so he'd be 29, 30, he'd be at his prime. And he made such an impression that the Maharaja Vizianagram of India wanted him to play for the best of Ceylon in India versus the MCC touring English side, which was, of course, Jardine's 11 that was on their way to Australia to play bodyline.
Okay.
And that was an interesting. Pop's got 7 wickets, and I'll show you a little trophy. He got man of the match for taking 7 wickets against the MCC. So that was a pretty big deal for him. Him and the fellow by the name of Nadu was the Indian fella.
Okay. So if somebody wants to search up quick info or whatever, how would we search up about your pop?
Well, you got to pay that. You got to pay the money to join that quick info. I've got I took a sly screenshot, and I took the game that they played the Australians who were touring, because they used to tour by ship. So what happened on the way they'd go Australia, go to play England, they'd tour by ship and pull in at India and Ceylon on the way through, and they were there like practice games on the way to playing England, and vice versa, coming back the other way. England would tour India and Ceylon back as it was known back then, and then end up in Australia to play test matches. So they played the first of those sorts of test matches, and Pops took 6 wickets against those Invincibles. So, Ponsford, Woodfull, McCabe, Vic Richardson, which is the Chappell's grandfather, Oldfield, who was the keeper. So Pop's got 6, Edward Kellart, his name was. So if you look Edward Kellart up, you'd find him. He was known as probably the best slipper in the land. He caught Bill Woodfull out, one hand to his right, that nearly, should have gone past him for 4.
Yeah.
And so like he had was a lot written about Pops and in our family, I suppose. I mean, they were said at one point that if you're a Kellart, you had to have a cricket bat in your hand. That was part of your first birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So which part of Sri Lanka your pop was living, Michael? And can you tell us about his school and sort of like what sort of jobs he was doing at the time, things like that?
Yeah, so look, it's an interesting story, and that's the whole reason probably our family came to Australia, because at one point the English were leaving India and Ceylon to their own devices, and basically, as you know from the burger background, they were looking for new places to move, and Don had actually said to Pop, they were in the middle of the cricket field, and said to Pop, Ed, if you're looking to come to Australia, you can come and work for my stockbroking company. So with that in mind, a few years later, he bought a ship, packed the family up, and came to Australia.
Far. Okay, so this was happening during the cricket match, which played in Gaul. Yeah, is that right?
Yep. Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay, so which year was this?
1930. I think 1930. Yeah, 1930.
Okay. So any idea what happened during that match?
So Australia were all out for 213 and Pops took 6 for 65.
Okay. When he was mentioning this, Tilak, I just looked up the name Edward Kellart, and it came as Ed Kellart on Wikipedia. So he was Edward George Samuel Kellart, born 30th December 1900, died in 13th October 1989. He played 18 matches. This is the first class career. 18 matches, 670 runs scored with a batting average of 25.76. He bowled 3,532 balls to take 60 wickets at an average of 22.41. Pretty interesting.
So, so Pops went to Royal College. And he was ended up being coach of Royal College, but he was a big Royal College guy. And for some reason, he sent my father to St. Thomas's. So there was interesting banter between the family.
It is an interesting combination, yeah, especially during the big match period.
The big match period where Pop's dad went out and decided he wanted to make a mess of Pops's number one man, bowler. And so, Dad was either 50 or a duck. He wasn't, nothing in between. And so he batted number 3 and I think he hit the first 3 balls for 6 and was out on the 4th. So,
right.
And he walked past Pop and Pop tried to say, well, you're not a big man now that you're out. So that was the competition in that family was immense.
Yeah, of course. So sounds like your grandfather and the whole family looks like were living in Colombo, of course. And do you know particularly which suburb in Colombo?
So yes, Dehiwala.
Dehiwala, righty. Okay.
Right.
I had to jog my memory then. Yeah.
So, do you by any chance have you met Don Bradman? How was that experience?
No. We steered clear. Bradman lived in South Australia, and we ended up in Melbourne. So, we sort of steered clear of that connection. It was like so that was Pops' era, and there's a couple of my cousins wanted to make that who lived in South Australia wanted to go around and visit him at his home and everything else. But he was so busy with so much other things that we sort of didn't pursue it. And but he actually wrote about Pops in his book, in his autobiography.
Okay.
And so if you ever get the chance to buy that book, you go to page I think it's 79. And I'll read you a little bit about what Pops wrote about, what he wrote about Pops. He basically said that it was 71. Here it is here. He said, the heat was so great that the Australians appeared in cork helmets. These fellows are making the sport look damn silly. Who are they? 90% of this is written in the paper by an Indian newspaper journalist. 90% of the spectators were natives and chanted songs. The score of 213 was disappointing. This is Bradman writing this, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Ponsford making 62, Woodfull 52, Bradman 40, McCabe 20. The rest collapsed. A native, Kellart, who took 6 wickets, is a splendid off-break bowler. He's actually a local player by the name of Ed Kellart who would have not been pleased at being called a native. That was Bradman writing about Pops, and he never forgot that sixfer that he took against the Invincibles. So, yeah, that was in Bradman's autobiography.
Yeah,
So
that's remarkable.
When your grandfather, as you very, very famously call it, Pop, was he discussing with you guys on sort of any great memories with
always.
Bradman? Why don't you share with us a couple of very, very interesting stories here?
Well, Pops, he'd share the story of when Jardine was coming to play against Bradman, and they formulated a thing called body line. If you bowl short to Bradman, you could get him out. So when he was playing for the best of India and Ceylon, he was playing at some ground, I think their best ground in India back. It would be now today. I can't remember the name of it, but he was bowling short balls at all the English team bowling short balls at all the Indian and Ceylonese players, and so he'd say in his accent, he'd say, Pops turned around and said, "Douglas, what is this stuff you're bawling?" And he says, we're just working on something, Ed. It's just a plan. Nothing to intimidate you guys. So he said all they were bowling was short pitch bowling, Larwood and all bowling short, and they stacked the field behind the batsman.
Yeah.
So that was the little story about how it came to Australia and it became a big deal, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of your family, have any one of those guys sort of met Don Bradman or
no,
have had dinners or
no, none of us met the Don, but a few obviously went on cousins that played Richmond and that sort of stuff, and I got invited down to training. Coached our club locally, and a few of us played in the local leagues, but obviously no one. I mean, I think Pop Edward he'd be one of those sports people that's a bit of a freak. I mean, when you represent your country in two separate sports, you've obviously got some sort of talent. Like you and I know Dad growing up said in Sri Lanka, Ceylon, he called it back in his name was that everyone would expect him to be Pop, to be playing the same level, to be that. And he said, Michael, Dad was a freak. Dad was one of these people you could never be Dad. And he said, now I know why Bradman's son changed his name to Bradson.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Michael. So, and of course, considering the time that we are talking about, these are roughly around 1938, 1940s. Is that right? Yes.
Yep.
So I know. So this is the time. This was the time that Second World War in place. So do you have any sort of memory coming from your family? Sort of like tree.
Oh, absolutely. Look, we talk about Australia was attacked by the Japanese in Darwin, but the Japanese were also trying to make a stronghold out of India and in Sri Lanka back in that World War II period. And the Indian Army were pretty powerful army. I mean, must admit, I mean, people underestimate how powerful that they are and how large their army is. That the general came, and because Pops had such a big name in cricket, his boss bought him his first home. So Pop's never ever had to buy his home. His boss bought him his home. So
He's very lucky.
A company called Bartlett or something it was called. So anyway, he was he got his first home, and the Indian Army came and stood post right round the home, and of course. The Indian general said to Pops, "You don't need to worry about your daughters, or because I've got 3 aunties, of course, as well as the 4 brothers, 4 uncles. There's 7 in the family." He said, "Edward, you don't need to worry about your family. They'll be well protected by my army." And they were just circled the whole house and right up the driveway. So that was an interesting period, and they were told, during the air raid sirens would go off, and they were all told to get under the kitchen table, so that if there was a bomb dropped, that they wouldn't, suffer anything. And Dad escaped from the kitchen, climbed up the coconut tree, and he was watching the dog fight between the English plane and the Japanese plane. And the Japanese plane got shot down. And him and my other uncle, like a cousin of his, jumped on a bike and rode their bike all the way where the plane had crashed, and they saw the Japanese pilot in the plane.
Oh, okay.
So but terrible. Well, can you imagine living through like a war like that? That we've never had to in our time, thankfully, experience that. But it would have been terrible. I mean, they were bombing Colombo. And if it wasn't for the Indian and the English resistance troops, they would have, who knows, they might have succeeded.
All right, Michael. So, of course, when we look at you, you look like a true blue Aussie for me. Yeah. Do people get surprised when they hear about your Sri Lankan roots at all?
Well, it's really interesting. So my boys went to school. So there's Kellarts that have got what you would say a Sudu suntan, and there's Kellarts that are like a bit colour, right? So when they go to school, there was my cousin's children who have got much more colouring than my children, because I married, of course, my wife's Irish English descent, So blonde hair, so blue eyes, so they're very pale. So they're in the same class, and the teacher said, "Hang on a minute, are you both a Kellart?" And my son said, "Are you surprised, miss?"
So obviously coming from a Sri Lankan background, could you speak any Sinhalese at all?
No. I know a couple of I know a baila or 2. Some basic words. If you say them, I can remember some of them, but very basic. Being born in Australia, like I said, sadly, that whole connection with our family sort of almost washed out. Like our parents who were born in the 30s, that generation, isn't it, from the 30s are all leaving us. So,
different generation. So, you mentioned about baila before. So, would you be able to sing a little few words of a baila song?
Look, I tell you, there's a funny baila. If you Google it was. I don't know if you heard of a fella by the name of Paul Hogan.
Paul Hogan, right? Okay.
So if you Google Babiachi, sung by Desmond someone?
No, Desmond. Yes, he sang that song too. But before that,
but Paul Hogan did a skit. They did a skit with Paul Hogan and singing Babiachi on a bike. So
So Babiachi was the name. They took a different kind of turn with that lyrics. I believe they call it after Babiachi. So
Paul Hogan, of course, from Crocodile Dundee. Paul Hogan, the very famous Australian actor. So he used to be in a comedy show. And they did use Babiachi as one of their songs. Oh, it's funny. If you Google it, you'll laugh.
So while we are now living in Australia, believe it or not, at one given point, we were very, very, very happy when we trashed Australia, and especially this is during 95, 96 time, where there was so many things happening around Murali and Sri Lanka, Australia not touring Sri Lanka during the World Cup, and of course the World Cup final and so on and so forth. During the incident of Murali, how did you feel about all that? I mean, with your Sri Lankan background, obviously, how did you feel about that whole fiasco?
Well, I thought the umpires made a fatal mistake of predetermining what they were going to call before a match. So they sort of let themselves down a little bit there, because I think Murali bowled a leg break and they tried to call that a no ball as well, and that made them look a bit silly. And I thought Sri Lanka handled that very well, because, I mean, they could have, if it was India, it'd be a different carry-on. Can you imagine? No one's called their fast bowler. He bends the arm as well, and no one's said a word about that. Look,
Bumrah.
Bumrah. Well, if you slow that down, you'll see that that's a bent arm. But look, they changed the rules for Murali in the end, which is interesting, because did you think he got an advantage? Probably did. I think if you were honest, you'd admit that. But at the time, no one else. Then there was a lot of other people, because they brought in the 15-degree rule, and there's a lot of other people that tried to exploit that. So he was the first to do it. I mean, he had a lot of variation with different, he put a lot of effort into his craft, and you can't take that away from him. I mean, so, it's history now. I mean, Australia had as much angst with New Zealand by bowling a ball underarm at one point to win a match. Where's the bar when you do things like that?
About the 1996 World Cup, obviously Sri Lanka, even as a cricket team at that point, I don't think many took them very seriously.
I was certainly
How was the overall feeling when Sri Lanka won the 1996 World Cup?
One of a lot of pride. We stayed up. I remember Dad, because it was broadcast here something like 3 a.m. or something, and we had a work day the next day. So but we stayed up and watched the whole game, and there was a point there where I didn't think Sri Lanka was going to win.
Yeah,
but they had this approach where I think the opening bowlers never seen anything like it. It was like a firestorm. They'd chase this new ball, and no one had ever batted really like that. I mean, you saw
Jayasuriya and Kalwitaruna.
Those guys would thrash that new ball, and no one had seen anything. That was new, that opening the batting with that much aggression was never really. I mean, you'd build 50 over game, you'd build an innings and make sure you manage your wickets all the way through. And they were batting like they were. It was a 2020 game, and I think they just took it away from the Australians straight away, and it was actually good to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, Michael. So, of course, we could clearly see that you have Sri Lankan heritage. Very clearly, we could see that. And my question is it something you still respect personally? And is it something your family tries to talk about or keep alive? So what's your opinion about?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. There's really, apart from my cousins, children are in up north in Northern Territory, who, he was a bit of a child prodigy. He was the Michael Clark's, under 17 player that he'd followed, and he took him over to England during an Ashes test. Apart from that, the family follows cricket. My children all follow cricket. They're all MCC members because we put them in when they were born. But, none of them really play at that level anymore, or, really hardly at all anymore. I mean, it's like typical of you look at the Australian landscape, the cricket teams, most of them are either Indian or Sri Lankan or Pakistan kids. The Australian kids hardly follow cricket for some reason. I don't know how we keep having Australian people in the team. It'll just be a matter of time before there's Amar Singh and Samarasekera and someone like that. They're Aussies. That's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Okay. So, like there's a little part in my question. So it's like, are you guys like even maybe in the dinner table or like maybe in the family conversation? Are you guys still talking about Sri Lanka? Like, so in your heritage in that regard? So is it?
If the conversation comes up or something on television or whatever, all the family take a keen interest. You got to remember these are second generation Australians now. Most of these kids, but they take a keen interest. I mean, I don't think you ever lose it. If that's your heritage, you're very proud of that, and there's no, it makes you have that point of difference with all your friends, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, of course, like you said now, like Australia has always been shaped by migration stories, like your own. And what do you think about how immigration is seen today? So we've seen like a lot of criticism towards like government policies about this, and we've seen a lot of rallies and protests in our cities. So what do you think about this?
Look, there is definitely a plan, if you like, by certain governments around the world, and I don't want to name any, but I'm happy to say Canada, England, Australia, and France, to import their votes. The migration story was very different back in the 40s and 50s, where it was we actually filled a skill set. So if we had a gap missing in the building industry, we'd bring carpenters in, or we'd bring plumbers in, or we bring, if there's a gap in the medical industry, there's a lot of Sri Lankan people ended up in the top medical industry in Australia. They're in the Parliament, in government, advising the government. I mean, these people are doctors with very qualified, but now it's just anyone and everyone. It's sort of. The way I see it, it looks like they're bringing people in and then fast tracking them into the electoral system just to gain votes, and I think that's very wrong, because you're bringing people in for the wrong reasons. And what we're getting is people that are coming that are not willing to accept the culture that they've come to. They want to bring their culture. These protests, without getting into the Israel and Gaza war. I mean, these protests have been almost racist in their outlook, and that disappoints me. That really disappoints me.
And in general, I mean, as we all know, Melbourne, especially, and Australia, of course, is really multicultural. Just sort of a specific question to ask you. You must be living in Australia, you would have associated so many different types of immigrants or cultures of immigrants who's been there. How do you see the overall adaptability of the Sri Lankans to the Australian culture?
Look, I can remember, and there was a bloke called Arthur Caldwell, and he was in government, and it was when a lot of the Sri Lankans came out in the 60s. The adaptability of Indians and Sri Lankans who speak English was seen as a great thing. I mean, the governments would say they adapt well because they speak English. They don't they integrate very well with these, because follow the same sport and everything else, and from the subcontinent community has been pretty good. I mean, I grew up in a place called Springvale, and That was the first migrant hostel that they ever built. And back then it was the £10 POM, and the POMs were the new Australians. So they were the ones that were trying to integrate. And they integrated pretty easily. POMs, when I say POMs for the Sri Lankan audience, that means English people. Prisoners of Mother England, they used to call them POMs. And and then we'd have the Yugoslav, which is now we call Yugoslav Macedonian, and that sort of culture all coming to Australia. But those people built on their back. They built the Snow River hydro electric system in Australia. They built the housing industry. They taught Australians how to craftsmanship in trades. The medical fraternity, as I said to you, from the Sri Lankan and Indian communities. There's a lot has come back reflected the other way too on our culture, which has been positive. But it's the go for broke now situation where current governments are trying to use it for things other than filling skill gaps and making fitting in with our culture. They're trying to change our culture. Which is your culture as well. They're just trying to change it for them. Sri Lankans and Indians and the Greeks and they never tried to do that. It was sure they had their own communities, but they really mixed very well.
So the overall adaptability of the Sri Lankans, the mixing with the Australian culture and the heritage has been really good.
Sri Lankans and Indians never wanted their own schools that had to be their culture, their beliefs, and they never wanted that. They've never ever asked for that, but we're getting that. Now we're getting that with the current, not Sri Lankans, but the current people that they're immigrating. They're asking for their own enclaves. And that's not how you immigrate to another country.
Yeah, absolutely.
True. So basically what you are saying is the current government is importing votes.
Well, I think they've just about admitted that. That's although they pretending that it's not happening and look the other way, it's basically what's happening. I mean, they've just realised just recently they fast-tracked a whole lot of immigration so they're able to vote. It's doing, when you do things for the wrong reasons, it ends up coming out wrong. It comes out wrong, and you'll start to divide the community when people want to have their own culture and not assimilate.
Correct.
All right, Michael. I think we've discussed a lot of areas and, of course, very nice stories about your grandpa. And those are remarkable stories. We really enjoyed about those stories and your family background and your heritage, of course. Being Sri Lankans, we are very proud to hear those stories and proud to see a guy like you, a well-adapted Aussie guy coming from Sri Lankan heritage. So which is something truly fascinating. So I would like to say thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your story. And thank you very much for being with us.
No problem.
I think it's been remarkable that we've been able to discuss about a legend, Don Bradman, and all these great stories. So it's kudos to you. Thank you very much for taking the time to join our program today.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
අපි අද දවසේ වැඩ කටයුතු අවසන් කරන්නයි සූදානම් වෙන්නේ.
සභාගාරයේ වැඩසටහන සමග ඔබට එකතු විය හැකි සභාගාරය නමින් අප විවෘත කොට තිබෙන Facebook පිටුවටත් YouTube channelයටත් සම්බන්ධ වීමෙන්.
ඒ වගේම මේ Facebook පිටුවෙත් YouTube channelයේත් අප වෙත ප්‍රතිචාර දක්වා තිබුණු අපේ දයාබර අසන්නන්ට අපි ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙන අතරේ තවදුරටත් එයාලට අදහස් යෝජනා ඒ වගේම නව නිර්මාණ වගේ දේවල් අප වෙත යොමු කරන්න අපේ ඊමේල් ලිපිනය මතක් කළොත් දේව
sabagare.radio@gmail.com තමයි අපගේ ඊමේල් ලිපිනය.
ඒ වගේම අද දිනේ අපි විශේෂ ස්තුතියක් කළ යුතු වෙනවා අපිට ශබ්ද පරිපාලනයෙන් සහාය දැක්වූ සංගීත ගුණතිලක වෙත. ඒ ඔහුවත් මතක් කරමින් අපි එහෙනම් සභාගාරයෙන් අද දිනට සමුගන්නයි මේ සූදානම් වෙන්නේ.
අපි සභාගාරය ඔස්සේ ලබන සතියේ හමු වෙමු. සුබ සතියක් ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා.
මම තිලක් ගමගේ
මම දේවලෝචන රණසිංහ.
කැරකෙන ලෝකයේ දකුණු අන්තයෙන් ඔබ වෙත තිලින කෙරෙන මාර්ගගත සංදේශය සභාගාරය